every time I come across a mock draft, I can't help it. I'm always interested. I am always going to click. I'm going to read just to see. I mean, it's clickbait material at its finest. And as we know, in July, mock drafts don't mean a darn thing because no mock draft last July had Patrick Queen or Justin Jefferson in round 1 or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, yet there they were hearing their names called. So whatever. And everybody had Grant Delpit this time last year in the top 10, and he ends up going in the middle of round 2. So I know it's not worth the paper it's printed on, but it is interesting for a conversation piece, and maybe even more so because of this tweet that I saw today from Matt Miller. Matt Miller, of course, at NFL Draft Scout, tweeted, it was this morning. He tweeted, conversation with one of the best scouts in the NFL this morning. Quote, if LSU gets consistent quarterback play, they're going back to the Natty. End quote. How could you not see that and just salivate? Because it's one thing, I think we all know this, third-party validation matters. It's like, it's one thing if, you see an endorsement or an advertisement for something, but then when your best friend tells you, man, they got great food, it's going to be more powerful, right? It's similar here. It's one thing if Ed Ogeron tells you, man, I love our team. I mean, they were pumped about Matt Canada in 2017, okay? It's one thing if media that covers the team that's probably going to slant toward that team tells you, man, I think they're going to be awesome. It's another when a guy who runs an independent scouting agency talks to, as he put it, one of the best NFL scouts in the business, and he says if LSU gets consistent quarterback play, they're going back to the Natty. And the reason's obvious. Look at the talent. That's why whenever I look for mock drafts, I see mock drafts, I'm going to click because I find that super duper interesting to see what the talent looks like. And this is one of those that underscores the point I think that Matt Miller was making in that tweet. The Bleacher Report updated mock draft has Jamar Chase going 4 to the Jets, Tyler Shelvin going 15 to Cleveland, Jacoby Stevens going 20 to the Colts. I'll come back to that. And then Terrace Marshall going 25 to Green Bay. The guy who was LSU's number 3 wide receiver last year, they've got going 25th overall in the draft, in this coming draft. 4 picks in the top 25. 4, which would be one shy of the LSU record, which they set last year with 5. I can't help but look at this and think about what Matt Miller tweeted and go, makes a lot of sense. Because for all of the conversations that we've had, about everything that LSU has lost, and what they lost was mighty. You lost Joe Burrow, you lost Joe Brady, you lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you lost Justin Jefferson, you lost your top 4 linebackers, you lost an enormous amount of production. This guy, Thor Nystrom, I don't know who he is, but he quote tweeted Matt Miller's tweet, right? Where he said, conversation with a scout, if LSU gets consistent quarterback play, they're going back to the Natty. This guy, Thor Nystrom, who apparently writes for NBCSports.com, I don't know who he is, but he put LSU's losses, passing game coordinator Brady, DC Aranda, QB Burrow, RB Edwards-Helaire, Jefferson, Delpit, Phillips, Queen, Divinity, Cushenberry, Charles, Fulton, Sullivan, Dillon, Lewis, McGee, Chasson, Moss, and then puts LSU isn't going back to the playoff. So that's true. LSU did lose all of those guys. But look at what they return. And this is where it's interesting when you look at LSU. Steve Ensminger, who was the architect of that offense, is back. You've got a 4th-year junior at quarterback who's been patiently waiting his turn. But again, if they get consistent quarterback play, that's the question. Helping him, however, are 5 offensive linemen who have started games for LSU. From Deculus and Dare Rosenthal to Ed Ingram, and you add Liam Shanahan to the mix as well, and Chasen Hines. You've got 5 guys who have started games for you on your offensive line. You've got the Biletnikoff Award winner back. Opposite him is a former 5-star who's projected in this mock draft to be a first-round pick. Your number 3 is Racy Mcmath. You got the highest-rated tight end in the history of 24/7 sports. You flexed out as part of this offense. You've got 3 running backs that were all top 10 in the country when they were signed. On the defensive side of the ball, you've got another guy who's projected to go 15th overall on your defensive line. When you start to look at linebacker, you've got a 2-time FCS All-American, Damone Clark, who may very well blow up this season, the best defensive back in college football, and Derek Stingley, another guy who's projected to go in round 1 on this list, Jacoby Stevens, and the guys who have played a ton of football for you before with Kerry Vincent and Todd Harris, and then you throw in other veterans, a guy like Cordell Flott who played a bunch of ball for you last year, and then you add all of the newcomers this season, like Ali Gay and Elias Ricks, and what they might be in this defense, and you go, okay. There's a lot there. So I get the skeptics who are going to look at what LSU lost and go, yeah, you're going to take a giant step back. But the thing that makes consistent championship contenders is when you have that exodus every year, but it never matters. At Clemson, they have that exodus every year, and it doesn't matter. At Bama, they have that exodus every year, and it doesn't matter because they're always in that conversation. And that's why this LSU team is the most intriguing team in all of college football this year. Because the big question is, they just lost all of this talent. Does it matter? Does it matter? If they churn this year and Brennan goes and throws for 280 and a couple of scores a game, and he throws for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, and you have another 1,000-yard rusher, and you average 38, 40 a game, and you go 11-1, and you're back right in Atlanta or competing for the playoff again, like that answers your question. Rinse, repeat. And it feels that's like where LSU's going with this. Specifically with this mock draft, Jamar Chase is the first wide receiver taken, 4th overall to the Jets. That's a no-brainer. I am very interested in Tyler Shelvin if he manages to get look, can you play that again, Brain? This was Ed Ogeron this morning on Off the Bench when he was asked about if Tyler Shelvin and Apu Ika could both play on the interior at the same time. Here's what he said.
First of all, if Tyler don't lose weight, I'm about to get a Mack truck to bring him up.
Oh, no. Uh-oh.
I do believe he will, and I do believe he's going to get down.
So Ed Ogeron's saying Tyler Shelvin's had weight gain. Look, a lot of us had weight gain amid COVID, but that's something he's got to get in check to make sure that he can go out and ball out this season. And then you look at Jacoby Stevens. This is the first time I've seen Jacoby Stevens in the first round in a mock draft. The fascinating thing about Jacoby is where's the comp? Where is the 220-pound safety, that's 6'2", 6'3", 220 that comps out for Jacoby Stevens? Is it Landon Collins? Maybe that's the comp. I don't know, but typically you don't see safeties go in round 1 unless if you have that transcendent player that's a top 10 pick, that's a can't-miss, surefire Jamal Adams type safety. Otherwise you start to see safeties come off the board in round 2, like where we saw Grant Delpit go. So I'll be interested to see, what the talk is about Stevens as we get closer. And then how about Terrace Marshall in round 1? I completely believe it. You had 2,000-yard receivers last year. Why not think you couldn't do that again? Listen, if Miles Brennan is throwing to 2 first-round picks, it's hard not to have a big year. I mean, when you think about this, there's only been one time in LSU history where they've had 2 first-round picks at receiver. It was 2006 when you had Debo and Buster Davis. And Jamarcus had a giant year, and LSU went to the Sugar Bowl, and it was a fantastic season back in 2006. Last year, you had Jefferson, who became a first-round pick, and obviously Chase will this year, and you won a national championship. The only other season that really compares is 2013, when you had Odell and Jarvis. Now, Jarvis became a second-round pick, but Mettenberger was a 3,000-yard passer that year, and LSU's defense slipped, but they were still a really good team, a great offense that year. So it's hard not to imagine the offense being really strong again, considering what you have on the outside. So, hey, man, I understand the skeptic. I do. Because if I were in their shoes and I looked at everything that a school lost, a team lost in a given year, and it was that giant list that we just went through, I'd go, it's hard. Like, how can you not take a step back when you lose all of that? But the difference is when you take a step back from literally the greatest season of all time, you can take a step back and still be a championship contender. You may not be the greatest of all time, but could you still be a team that's competing to win the national championship? I think so. And I think that's the expectation for this team with potential 4 first-round picks and double-digit overall drafted players again this year. Like Clemson, like Bama. You lose all those players, does it really matter? Rinse, repeat. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.